Secretary Mayorkas, airports are uniquely vulnerable to these drone threats, and one of my greatest concerns is a drone interfering with a commercial aircraft near the airport. So talk to me and have the committee know how important these authorities are, particularly in protecting aircraft, and whether or not folks can do it themselves or we need to do this, and this is why we need these authorities.
Mr. Chairman, I thank you. I echo everything Director Wray expressed with respect to the criticality of renewing our authorities under the Counter Unmanned Aerial Systems law. It expires November 18th. The same holds true for airports. Owners and operators of aircraft have communicated to us loudly and clearly that the federal authority needs to be maintained. They cannot protect the airspace by themselves. I think that is a misimpression of the reality that we confront. And it's not only these large public facilities, these airports and the like, it's also importantly the border. We take down the drones of the cartels that are seeking to move contraband across the border. It is a very, very important authority that we have.
Great. Thank you. Senator Scott, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, thank you all for being here. You know, I'll tell you, I was involved in politics until I ran for governor in 2010. But the one thing that has surprised me up here is the lack of information. I mean, you know, I don't know the specifics that Senator Johnson was asking for, but it has surprised me how difficult it is just to get basic information. And what I learned as my time as governor is just if you weren't transparent, then people assume the worst. So, and I'm sure I've never had y'all's jobs, so I know your jobs are hard, but the more information you can get out there, your lives will be easier, I assume. So, but I haven't had your job, so take it with a grain of salt. So, Secretary Mayorkas, as you heard during my discussion with Director Wray, I'm concerned about our country is once again missing the clear and present dangers that are risk of a terror attack on American soil, coordinated or orchestrated by a foreign terror organization, is probably the highest in my lifetime. Like Director Wray, you have warned since the October 7th attack by Iran-backed Hamas terrorists on Israel that there are increased threats to Americans and of attacks on U.S. soil. And a lot of people can talk about how we got here. I'd like to focus on how we're going to fix this. In the past 3 years, CBP has caught 264 individuals on the terror watch list attempting to illegally enter the U.S. through the southwest border, which is, my understanding, a record high. More terrifying, since January 2021, more than 1.7 million gotaways have evaded Border Patrol and escaped into the interior. We don't have any idea who these people are. They could be harmless, they could be terrorists. But what I've seen, when talking to CBP agents, if they're harmless, they tend to want to be caught by CBP because they're given care and a place to stay. The ones that run away from agents likely probably have something to hide. And also when you go to the border, people have thrown their IDs away so people don't know who they are. All told, during the Biden administration, CBP has encountered, my understanding, 6.4 million illegal aliens along the southwest border. Tens of thousands of illegal aliens have been caught between ports of entry trying to sneak into our country undetected from countries that harbor terrorism. We're talking about places like Iran and Syria, both they're on the state-sponsored terrorism list, and countries that pose a potential national security risk to the U.S. like Communist China, who funds Iran. This February, the State Department issued its Country Report on Terrorism 2021, which says Lebanon-based and Iran-backed terrorist groups, Hezbollah, continued its long history of activity in the Western Hemisphere. And we know that Iran-backed terrorists are harbored by failed states like Venezuela. On October 20, CBP issued a memo warning that foreigner fighters from the Middle East might be trying to enter the U.S. from Mexico. In the past two years, CBP agents have encountered 659 people from Iran. So that's 600, think about that, 659 people from Iran, which hates, they chant death to America and they want to kill all the Jews in Israel. So this is concerning, especially considering the recent Iran-backed attack on our brave U.S. servicemen and women in Iraq and Syria. So, Secretary Mayorkas, you recently spoke to some Jewish leaders. You said, quote, "We remain very concerned about the lone wolf, the individual inside the violence by ideology of hate." So this is the same question I asked Director Wray. Is it fair for the American people to interpret this as you are not concerned at all with a coordinated attack by foreign terrorists on Americans here on U.S. soil?
Senator Scott, I would answer that exactly as Director Ray did. We are concerned about all threats, all hazards across the entire spectrum, as I captured in my opening statement, and the safety and security of the American people is our highest priority.
Okay. Can you say that Hamas, Hezbollah, or other Iran-backed terrorists are not in the U.S. currently after possibly illegally crossing our southern border?
Senator, let me assure you that anyone who poses a threat to our national security or our public safety is an enforcement priority of ours, and we use our detention capabilities to the fullest extent.
So you acknowledge that with the number of people that have come across the border, we have the risk of Hezbollah, Hamas, people like that.
We meet that risk with extraordinary capabilities of our personnel.
Okay. So I just have a final question for each of you, and we'll start with Director Ray. So do you believe, is the United States safer from foreign terror threats today? Are we safer than when Joe Biden took office, from the day he took office?
What I would say to you is that the terror threats have elevated, but I also think there are a lot of things the country has done throughout law enforcement to be better prepared to deal with them.
Victor?
The threats are very different today than they were a number of years ago. They were very different today than they were 3 weeks ago, and our capabilities are far more advanced given the investments in our people, technology, and other resources.
Thank you.
All of you.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Marshall, you're recognized for your questions. Can I yield to Senator Hawley? Absolutely. Senator Hawley, you're ready.
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, when you were last before this committee, we talked about the tens of thousands, it's actually 420,000 unaccompanied migrant children who have come across the border under your watch. We talked about the reports of the number of these children who have been lost, who have been sold into labor trafficking, into sex trafficking. Since your last appearance, the numbers have grown worse. It now approaches 100,000 children, according to public reports, 100,000 children lost by your department and the Biden administration, migrant children sold into labor trafficking and sex trafficking. Now, your Department of Homeland Security Investigations has the authority to do child exploitation investigations. How many of these kids have you gotten back?
Senator, we actually have prioritized the rescue of children who have been human trafficked. Our role in the immigration process is to, with respect to unaccompanied children specifically, is to turn them over under the law within 72 hours to the Department of Health and Human Services, and that is indeed what we do.
But how many of the children, nearly 100,000 children, in you've read the New York Times reports, I assume, Mr. Secretary.
I have read many reports, Senator Hawley.
But do you know what I'm talking about with the number of children who have been sent to operate heavy machinery, who are not being paid, who are not going to school, who are being denied food, migrant children unaccompanied, who are now in the clutches of labor traffickers? You're familiar with this, right?
That is precisely why I revised our worksite enforcement.
Good. How many of the kids have you gotten back then? 85,000 or more now. Lost contact with. It's been months since you were last here. How many of those children have you rescued? Can you give me a number?
You are conflating issues.
So you can't give me a number. You haven't rescued any of these children. You haven't gotten any of them back.
You are conflating issues and what is within our remit and what is outside of it.
Okay. Well, it doesn't sound to me like this is a priority, and I have to tell you, that's what your own agents tell me as well. A whistleblower from your Agency of Homeland Security Investigations has come to me and has said that special agents who are working on child trafficking cases and fentanyl interdiction cases have been pulled off of their investigations and sent to the southern border. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these agents at a time, taken out of the field, taken off child exploitation cases, and sent to the southern border. Here's some of what she said. She said, we're being told to shut down investigations, to go hand out sandwiches and escort migrants to the shower and sit with them while they're in the hospital, and those types of tasks. Mr. Secretary, you're taking special agents away from investigating child traffickers and child exploitation when you've lost tens of thousands of kids to traffickers, and you're sending them to make sandwiches at the border. What is going on?
You are incorrect, Senator.
Are there special agents from HSI at the border?
Senator, we have a number of priorities. We prioritize trafficking in children. We prioritize the fight against fentanyl. We prioritize.
Mr. Secretary, you're not answering my question.
We
You're not answering my question. Are there HSI special agents who are currently at the border, having been pulled away from other cases? Yes or no?
Combating the fight against fentanyl, yes.
How many agents are currently at the border, having been pulled off of their other cases?
To fight the scourge of fentanyl, I'd be very pleased to provide you with that data.
That's not what the special agent is alleging. That's not what she said. She said that they're being taken off of fentanyl interdiction, off of child exploitation cases, off of their other investigations into criminals to make sandwiches. That's her quote. You're saying that this is a lie, that she's wrong?
Senator, we have a number of law enforcement priorities with the resources.
Is making
we
sandwiches
have.
one of them?
We have, of course not, Senator. We accomplish a tremendous amount.
Is she wrong?
Because of the tremendous talent and dedication of our personnel, including Homeland Security investigation.
Making sandwiches for illegal immigrants? Is she wrong? This is one of your agents. Is she wrong? She says that there are 600 at least special agents pulled off of other cases, sent down to the border to babysit illegal immigrants. Is she wrong?
Senator, our personnel, we use our personnel to achieve the maximum law enforcement objective possible. That is what we do.
So you're not going to deny it?
And I'm incredibly proud of what our people do
Well,
every
this is news.
single day.
This is news. Well, I want to thank this brave whistleblower for coming forward and let the record reflect that the Secretary will not deny what she has said, that hundreds of special agents are pulled off of their law enforcement duties all around the country, by the way. Her testimony to me is this happens all around the country and sent down to the border to make sandwiches for illegal immigrants. This is your administration in action. It's a total failure, Mr. Secretary.
That is incorrect.
Marshall, you're recognized for your questions.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Mr. Secretary, do DHS employees have your personal contact information? And how widespread do you believe the distribution of your personal contact information is to DHS personnel?
When you speak of personal information, do you mean outside of the work context?
Your personal contact information, your personal emails.
Senator, I do not distribute that to DHS personnel.
Aside from email and text messaging, do you use any other form of personal electronic communication, such as encrypted message applications that may have errantly received or transmitted communications relating to official DHS business?
Senator, I follow the rules scrupulously.
Is that a yes or a no?
Senator, I follow the rules scrupulously.
Okay. In April, in sworn testimony for this committee, you insisted, and I'll quote you, if somebody errantly sends me an email, my personal email, that should have been sent to my work email. I forward it to my work email. That's what I do. I fulfill my responsibilities scrupulously, and I have 100% confidence in the integrity of the actions. Despite that, a FOIA lawsuit by Americans for Prosperity has uncovered hundreds of pages of records reflecting your personal use of personal email account and cell phone for official DHS business since you assumed the office of Secretary. We sent you a letter on July 13 asking for additional questions on your and your subordinates' adherence to this DHS policy on the use of non-DHS emails, but thus far you've failed to respond to me. Will you commit to getting answers to our letter?
I'll be happy to look at your inquiry and respond accordingly. What you just articulated is perfect evidence of the fact that I have followed the rules.
And that explains why there's hundreds of pages of records reflecting your personal email account and cell phone for official DHS business?
Senator, you misstate the facts.
I've repeatedly said, don't watch what this White House does. I've repeatedly said, don't watch what this White House says, watch what they do. In May, the Biden administration said when Title 42 ended that migrants would face tougher consequences, and I quote that, tougher consequences if they were caught crossing the border illegally. But just in the last border crossing numbers from this past week, the Biden administration's actions showed that Border Patrol released with no consequence 156,000 migrants into the U.S. in September alone. Mr. Secretary, what are the consequences your administration threatened? From where I stand, the only consequences I see of border crossings are the historic number of crossings and the consequences that the American people are less safe today than they were 3 years ago.
Senator, that is incorrect. Removal and return of individuals under Title VIII of the United States Code is one example of a consequence that we deliver. In fact, in fiscal year 2023, we removed or returned more than 620,000 individuals. Just recently, we announced that we negotiated an agreement with Venezuela for the first time.
So you sent
to be
back
able to-
10, maybe 200 people, but there's tens of thousands of them are still here. How do you explain the 156,000 migrants in September alone that were released without any consequences?
That is incorrect.
So you didn't release 156,000 migrants into the United States.
Senator, those individuals, when they are processed, they are placed in immigration enforcement proceedings. If they do not qualify for relief, they are subject to removal. If they qualify for relief under the laws that Congress has passed, then they have established a basis to stay in the United States.
What percentage are removed? What percentage have been through the process that are then removed? What percentage of these folks actually have had a hearing? How long is the wait for this hearing? How would you describe these to the American people that would make them feel safer today, how you handle that process?
The wait for the hearing is a perfect example of how broken our immigration system is. And in fact, when I first entered federal government here in Washington, D.C., after 12 years serving in California as a federal prosecutor, I learned that the time in between encounter and the final adjudication of an immigration case in 2009 was more than 6 years. So this problem of a broken immigration system has lasted for more than 2 decades. I believe the system was last reformed in 1996, and we are long overdue for a fix.
Would a first safe country asylum policy make us more safe or less safe?
Senator, the issue of a safe third country agreement is a matter of negotiation with third countries.
That's not my question. Would it make us more safe or less safe if there was indeed one?
It is a complex question that cannot be distilled with a simple question and answer as you have posed.
2/3, maybe 70% of the people that are encountered at our borders go through an asylum process. What percentage would you estimate if there was a third country policy in effect, or a first safe country in effect? What percentage would that eliminate from ever even getting to our border?
I think that's a very difficult statistic to
Not a guess.
present.
I mean, you're
But-
the
but-
Secretary of Homeland Security. You don't have a guess how much of an impact that would make.
Well, I'm not in the guessing business, but I will say this, that when you ask about a consequence in the absence of one, I think it would be important to ask the more than 1.2 million people in fiscal year 2023 who've been returned, removed, or expelled under the law.
Thank you. I yield back.
Great. Thank you, Senator Marshall. Well, I want to thank our witnesses, but I have one more question, and I'm going to ask Director Abizaid this question. The biological threat landscape is clearly growing in complexity. For example, the convergence of biological sciences with emerging technologies such as AI is offering all sorts of opportunities to create bioweapons. So my question for you, Director, is due in part to the pandemic, we're seeing biolabs spring up all over the world right now. And I, as well as many other experts, are worried that they're not being built to or operated according to appropriate safety standards. So I'd like you to address the committee as to what threats do these weak lab safety and security practices overseas pose to our homeland security? What should we be thinking about? What should we be doing?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Senator. This is something that we work closely with our colleagues at NCBC on to, one, try and understand the threat environment, and then two, what kind of protections would best protect against it. Most of what we see today would be at a level of sophistication that the terrorist actors that we follow would not be able to immediately leverage for their own purposes. You mentioned technologies like AI significantly increasing that threat, that capability over time. And I think especially as next generation models of AI come into play, that's going to be something that we'll need to be concerned about. And so regulatory frameworks or different kinds of protections on some of those models that protect against bad actors getting access to the most dangerous kinds of information to assist their capabilities is going to be important. As we look at lab security, one of the things that NCBC is working with its partners on is trying to expand the scope of its monitoring program beyond the sort of high sophistication labs to some of these lower sophistication labs that you mentioned that are of concern.
Great. Well, thank you. I want to thank our witnesses for appearing before the committee here today to share your perspective on the threats facing our country and the work that the federal government is doing to mitigate these national security threats and to keep all Americans safe. I look forward to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle in the months ahead to ensure that Congress is doing its part to stay innovative and vigilant in the face of constantly evolving threats. On behalf of this committee, I'd also want to take this opportunity to thank the incredibly dedicated men and women at your respective agencies for the work that they perform on a daily basis, every single day, to keep our nation safe and to keep us safe from a constantly evolving threat environment. We can't thank them enough. Please convey to each and every one of them how much we appreciate that. The hearing for this, or the record rather, for this hearing will remain open for 15 days until November 15th at 5 p.m. for the submission of statements and questions for the record. This hearing is now adjourned.